Like you can tell.
No one has,
Yeah.
no one has signed in.
So that's a fox. That's an elephant. Oh, that's an architect.
He carries a triangle in his belt. That's how he tells us.
It used to be a slide rule. First,
There is this, what is the Association of Architects of America?
AIA or something like that.
AIA. Yeah.
Do they have a chapter that deals with preservation of buildings?
Oh, sure.
Facade thing?
We have a quorum.
Benefit to the city.
First order of business is the minutes from the meeting of January 12th.
Yeah, but
We have multiple conversations going on.
Is there a motion or comments regarding the minutes of the last meeting?
I have a comment, that's why I turned my light on.
Go ahead.
Okay, in the meeting minutes, it says that we've put off a discussion on the property owner, Jackie Goldberg, and her architect issue. It says here that we put off and took no action, tabling discussion to the February meeting. I do not recall us tabling anything for discussion. My recollection is that we recommended that they meet with their lawyer and perhaps do an appeal or something. Is that correct? Does that meet with your recollection of what we suggested to them?
I think it's sort of inartfully drafted. I think that particular item was not continued. It was the
So inartfully drafted is the zoning of the map amendment?
Yeah, I think so. I
not
think so.
the conversation
Right.
For property owner.
Right. That's my recollection.
Okay. Okay. Then I inartfully read the minutes.
Is there a motion
Is
to...
that so? Is that was the intent of the minutes?
Yes, yeah, the overall discussion was moved to this meeting, and so...
But the overall discussion of the request of the property owner was not moved to this meeting.
The topic of the map amendment itself, including her conversation.
No,
There was no motion to...
I don't believe there's any discussion about what we were going to do.
including discussing it in this meeting.
Right. I don't believe. So,
I think the way we left it was that she was in the wrong place. It appeared that she was looking for a zoning change. So since that became apparent, I think she was directed to actually either take it to zoning or contact a lawyer. I think that's how it was left. Yeah.
That's my recollection as well.
yes, it's my recollection too.
So can you suggest whoever's going to move approval with the change? I wasn't here, so I can't.
Well, I think we tabled discussion on the introduction of the proposed zoning map changes to the Plan Commission, and that last sentence, I think, refers to that, although we did not, it's not my recollection that we continued to tonight any discussion on the Jackie Goldberg project. I think we sort of disposed of that altogether.
We denied her request is what we did, saying that she basically had 5 years, there was 5 years of deliberation on this plan, that this is not the forum at this point for her to come in and request a zoning change, right? And that's what I just think we should have if there's a public record of what happened, it needs to be factual.
I believe there was a myriad of discussion, but there was no definitive action taken by all of us because there was no vote on anything. There were merely comments to her. And all of you have expressed various comments that I think were laid to her. But I don't recall any of those being directions officially from the Plan Commission, or I don't recall us proposing that we would take it up necessarily at any time in the future or not.
So is it the consensus that there was no decision on her request? She was advised to
seek legal counsel.
seek legal counsel, and the matter was left undisposed of.
That's my recollection.
My opinion is that the matter was disposed of, saying that we are not the, she should not be bringing this to us at this point, because the downtown plan was approved by the city council, and the process for a change now to the zoning is not to come directly to the plan commission.
Let me
Andrew,
Let me suggest a different motion, to table this item till the next meeting and look at the record and see what was said.
Well, I can say this, if I might, Mr. Chairman, that we had no authority to do anything with respect to this particular item.
And we told her that.
And we told her that. So we had no power to dispose of it either way.
Is there a consensus that that's what was decided, or do we need to look at the record?
Can you reiterate that, Stu?
Well, the Plan Commission had no authority to address the particular proposal that was made. It was simply not in our bailiwick to do so. And we told Mrs. Goldberg that, and we told her that if she wanted to submit this for some kind of review, it should be done to the city officials, but not the Plan Commission. We were not the forum to dispose of this.
Is there a consensus on that? If there isn't, we should look at the record. It's convenient having a record.
I think we should look at the record.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes with the exception of that section.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 We'll proceed tonight with staff making a presentation, the commission commenting, and then open it up to the public. We'll start with the zoning text amendment, and then assuming we finish that discussion and can make a recommendation to the council, we can move to the map amendment. Is staff ready? Craig or Dominic? Let me do one other precatory thing. This is a hearing on a proposed ordinance, and if members of the public plan to make any factual statements, you should be sworn as a witness. So is there anyone that plans to make any factual statements? Do you affirm that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. We can proceed.
Chairman Peters, I would like to open with maybe you providing a brief presentation of the memo that you provided to me today, and then we can frame the smaller details through staff recommendations as well.
Mr. Galloway and I went through the ordinance, portions of the ordinance, in a lot of detail, attempting to add some precision. And one of the things that jumped off the page at me was that with respect to the question of discretion and whether the wording should be may or shall, from a policy perspective, some of the bonus provisions are, I think, best handled with may and some discretion, and others are very clear-cut and could be non-discretion. You meet the standards, you get the approval. So we went through each of the standards, and I'll just there's memos out there summarizing the argument, but underground parking, for example, there are formulas, it's clear. Underground parking is desirable if they comply with the standards, and there I don't recommend a substantive standard. Whole building sustainability is fairly clear. I think it's desirable, and we could use a non-discretionary standard. Inclusionary housing is pretty clear. I think affordable housing space is clear. But when we come to public park and open space, some really terrible things could be built that meet the standards. Dank, dark, damp parks, open space in the wrong place, open space where it harms the flow of shoppers and pedestrians. And there I think some discretion would be useful so that the Plan Commission and Council can consider whether proposed open space benefits the city before giving a bonus or is detrimental. Above grade parking concealed by habitable space, I think it's a good objective. The standards are pretty clear. If you meet the standards, a good result. Landmark building and historic preservation, on the other hand, could be many different things. You can, the most extreme example I stuck in a footnote. My wife and I went by a place for about 2 months, and there was a big sign that said, "Restoration coming." And then we saw, the next time we went by, there were bulldozers, and they completely knocked it down. And they restored it by building a new building that was sort of similar to, maybe to an old building, but quite different than what was there. That's restoration. Anything is restoration. And similarly, the particular techniques and application of historic building preservation can be quite varied. And I think if we're giving bonuses, we need to look at what's proposed and have discretion to say that works, or this is a proposal that's not really useful. And the substance to do that isn't in the standards. An example of a historic preservation that might not be useful, there was a proposal before the City Council in Chicago to build a 40-story high-rise at the location of Union Station. And what was preserved were the columns around the Union Station, which would have shiny glass between them and then a 40-story building going up. I'm not sure we would want to give bonus points for that kind of preservation. Of course, in Evanston, it wouldn't be 40 stories, but still, arguments can be made. That's preservation, and I think we need discretion to see what kind of preservation there is. I make the same argument with respect to streetscape and alley improvements. Could be almost anything, and the improvement word is not in the standards. So it's sort of streetscape and alley change. Similarly, public plazas have the same problem as public parks. Depending on where they're located, they can be beneficial or detrimental. Facade improvements, same kind of problem. So I suggested to, and I think it's incorporated in the draft you have, that for some of these, we add a standard that the proposal is beneficial, rather than all non-discretionary or all discretionary. I think the commission needs to be able to look at that.
Scott, would there be any advantage on something like landmark building and historic building preservation in specifying what the process is? Does it go to the landmark and preservation, historic preservation committee first, and then does a recommendation come to us? I mean, it seemed very open-ended. I don't know if you want to close that in a bit.
Yeah,
Commissions.
Craig, you were.
I agree with you on that.
Craig explained this to me and showed me the text, and I'll ask him to answer the question on process.
Good evening. Specifically pertaining to that section is item 4 on page 20. Restoration projects must be consistent with section 2-9-9 of the city code. standards for review of applications for certificates of appropriateness. We actually have a small text amendment to that tonight that reflects more to Title II, Section 9 as amended. That deals specifically with historic preservation components, any building that's going after, that's a landmark that wants to do any restoration has to get a certificate of appropriateness. And there are trigger points during that process that would actually send it to the Preservation Commission.
So, rules could be adopted. I don't think it has to be in the ordinance, but rules can be adopted to clarify it. I've urged that joint meetings be conducted to avoid the two commissions having different conclusions. But sometimes it's not feasible, and so that clearly the input from historic preservation is necessary. It's provided for in the text, and I don't think we need to specify in this document the process.
I think we have a larger issue, and first of all, I appreciate the work you guys did here. But I think we have a larger issue, and that goes back to the may or the shall, and what the intent was of the downtown plan. And from my perspective, what we're supposed to be doing is implementing the downtown plan, not changing the intent of the downtown plan. So I know we had a pretty big conversation last meeting, last month, about those two words. And I'm not sure we came to a conclusion. And in fact, I think there was a suggestion at one point of bringing the consultants back in, and I objected to that because I didn't want to spend money on consultants because we spent enough on them. But, you know, so I don't think we've addressed that completely. And I also have a concern whether, you know, Scott, and that we have a memo that you've done some great work, and I basically agree with most of the stuff here. But what is the process to have stuff being put in to the amendments? Don't we normally have a conversation about that before they get added? So we have two members of the Plan Commission putting a memo to you, Craig, that we never saw until we show up, and it's already in. So I want to know about process there. And I'm not saying I don't agree with some of the things you have here. I do. But I just, you know, I do recall that when we were doing the downtown plan that maybe it's more than 3 people can't meet separately, and this was just 2. I know that there are issues around that I had been advised on. So I want to understand that. So there are a couple issues that I have, and then I'd like to discuss some of these points. And when we talk about the intent of may versus shall, we talk about parking. There are many cities all over the world that are trying to reduce the amount of parking in downtown areas to encourage people to take public transportation or other things to not park. But now, you know, so what happens if, you know, 5 years from now or a couple years from now, the city doesn't want all this parking, underground parking. They want to have less parking to encourage people to not drive into the downtown area. And we're codifying into our plan that says, well, if you do this, we're going to automatically give you bonuses, so we're encouraging you to create more parking. In your thing here, you say it's very clear and desirable. I don't know if more parking is really desirable, or in the long term, for the health of our community, it's desirable.
I think we're not changing the number of spaces in that section. It's just a question of whether it's located underground or surface.
That's correct. That's correct.
And I would agree, one of the things the Commission needs to put on their agenda is the question of parking in the area of where transit's available.
So I understand we're not changing the number of I was just using that as an example as to why we don't want to codify into plans the may versus shall. I was just using it as an example. I understand we're not changing the number of parking spaces. So I know I brought up a lot of stuff. Sorry for bringing up all those issues at once, but maybe the first thing we need to deal with is the shall versus may.
Commissioners?
Just a comment on your concern going back to
the original intent of drafting these particular elements, it was understood at that time that they may change over time. And it was understood that part of the responsibility of council is if they think one of these criteria should change, to make a recommendation back to the Plan Commission to work on that. Because, you know, in an economy where we're trying to create jobs, I don't think anybody wants to cut down on anything that will attract customers to our downtown area. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that may be different. But the whole intent is that this was not going to be put in concrete forever. This is where it was going to start, and if circumstance changed and needs changed, that that part of the zoning would change. So
It can
I
take
think
us-
I wouldn't worry
it can
about
take us
that.
months, if not years, to change zoning.
And it can take, and sometimes it takes 2 meetings.
And sometimes it takes 2 meetings.
So, I mean-
And my comment is about the intent and of what the plan had said. And you know, I'm going to ask Stuart to perhaps talk about the conversation that he had, that I had overheard when I first walked in today about that precise thing. And what it does is gives us flexibility. It doesn't say that, and you know, the may versus shall. And I just don't think we've nailed that.
We'll just move right down the line.
Okay, I was a strong proponent at our last meeting that the language should be shall and not may, and I'm backing off of that position. I've revisited the plan, and in every instance it uses the word may, and I'll read a portion of the plan on page 112, 6.2, that says, decision-making criteria. In acting on requested floor area bonuses, the Plan Commission and the City Council must evaluate proposed amenities based on their contribution to and the degree to which they enhance the quality of life and benefit the public in the surrounding area. Floor area bonuses may be approved only if they, 1, comply with the standards and criteria of this section, and 2, are planned, designed, and located to provide public benefits for downtown residents and visitors. So to me, this says that the council and the Plan Commission reserve some measure of discretion as to whether or not a bonus shall be granted or not. But I agree to some extent with what Larry said. This whole thing, the genesis of part of this was we wanted to give developers some certainty to eliminate some of the arbitrariness that the City Council and others had exhibited. So we wanted to make it a little bit more friendly for developers. But according to this, the council reserves some discretion, as does the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Stuart.
Did you have something? Moving.
Well, I think if we go back to the... Is it on? You know, I think there seems to be a sentiment that if the word may is used, then, you know, somehow the document is not business friendly. And I think none of us here actually want to deter any business from taking place here. So we understand that there is a need for clarity. But I think from our last discussion, what we are trying to do, based on the path that I think staff gave us, which is if a developer is actually coming to Evanston, and if they are worth anything, they will actually speak with staff in an effort to determine what the city considers beneficial at that particular time. Our effort to basically advocate may instead of shall was in a way to compel a developer to speak with staff to find out what the city at that particular moment considers a benefit or something that is advantage. So I don't think that may actually will deter business, nor do I think it blurs things up. I think it actually says before you actually start building, talk to somebody in staff so that we actually, what is needed.
Other comments? If the consensus is that may is appropriate, the language from that Stuart showed us should probably be added to the public benefits bonus section, and the word shall, which is inconsistent with this language, should be changed. Is there a motion to do that? And the language is, in acting on requested floor area bonuses, the Plan Commission and the City Council must evaluate proposed amenities based on their contribution to and the degree to which they enhance the quality of life and benefit the public in the surrounding area. That would clarify the intent.
But that's at the beginning of the section to begin with, correct? That applies to everything. I don't think
if that's the consensus, I'm asking for a motion to put it in the beginning, and then it applies to all bonuses.
I would make that motion. I would so move.
Okay. So we have a motion to add the language of 6.2 of Section 8 of the plan, which reads, in acting on requested floor area bonuses, the Plan Commission and City Council must evaluate proposed amenities based on their contribution to and the degree to which they enhance the quality of life and benefit the public in the surrounding area. And the motion also would include removing the word shall in other sections, which is inconsistent with this phrasing.
Well, I just have a question. One, we added shall recently. So do we need a motion to remove it? I don't know if we do, because we have not approved this amendment.
It would clarify what's before us.
And then, two, that is a major change to the plan, and are we allowed to do that?
It's the language comes from the plan.
This is the downtown.
No, I understand that, but it changes, it takes it and puts it, you're saying leave it there, but then also move it back up to the top.
It gives effect
Okay.
to this language
Okay.
in the plan.
Okay.
Is there discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Motion carries. I think I didn't ask.
We
for
didn't have a
second.
second.
Would anyone like to have seconded that?
Second.
So we have a post hoc second.
Thank you.
And with that, we can return to staff presentation.
I would like to raise again the issue of how we get things into, just for clarification for myself and for the future. One, I really appreciate you guys working outside of, going above and beyond. You're doing extra work, and that's awesome. What is the accepted practice and procedure for getting stuff added to here?
My plan had been to read this at the meeting so that you could all consider it.
Before we got it added.
And I wanted, because staff are experts, I wanted to get their input in writing the memo. We met, two of us met with staff, which I think did not violate open meeting rules, to talk about mostly text changes that were not substantive, and sort of all reached the same conclusion. And as they were amending, they just incorporated it. It might be that next time they would not incorporate it and just bring it here. Dennis?
Yes, I just want to try and be helpful to the question that Seth Friedman's raised. I think the key issue is that from Scott Peters, what we have in effect is a proposal tonight in the form of the memorandum. Staff did incorporate a number of his concepts in here, again, as a working document, a draft document for your consideration, and a number of those things are highlighted in here. So from that point of view, this is, the public discussion of that proposal and presentation of that proposal by Mr. Peters. And you're right, certainly, Mr. Friedman, in terms of a process that's the most frequently used process is for things first to be discussed here, and then staff goes back and makes revisions per the direction of the commission. But in this case, the chair, has certain needs and prerogatives to meet with staff. The important thing is that that be talked about as a proposed concept in a public hearing mode, in a public meeting, and that's what we're doing tonight. The other thing that we clearly sense is that, if you remember, staff in December asked the commission not to approve and recommend anything that night because we didn't think there had been enough time for public review and comment. We're taking a different approach tonight, which is strongly encouraging you, if it's possible, to move forward with a recommendation to the Planning and Development Committee. So that also caused us to try and make things more efficient and a bit expedite, but not with, certainly didn't violate, any procedural appropriateness by doing that, because the important thing is we're airing it here tonight. Again, Mr. Peters presenting it as a proposal, not as a fait accompli.
Other questions? Let's proceed through the text.
Thank you, Dennis.
Good evening. Like Dennis Marino had mentioned, this was an attempt to expedite the process, but at the same time, the recommendations that...
Can you identify yourself?
My name is Craig Sklenar. I'm the general planner. Pursuant to the memo that I provided in the Plan Commission packet, there were essentially three major components that we looked at in some revisions. The first is formatting and order, and what we did was just kind of try to make sure consistency for each public benefit bonus, that there's a logical flow to how the information is presented, and I think we're near to completeness on those components. The second is FAR calculations. Further review, I was asked to do some research by the Plan Commission on how do these FAR calculations compare to other cities? How do they provide their metrics? City examples like the City of Miami, City of Seattle, and even the City of Chicago have public benefit bonus structures. A lot of them are like the old calculations that we had, which were tied to land market value, lease rent value, that had to be continually updated. So what we've done here is replace those along with the calculations that were more square footage allotments and not FAR percentage bonus calculations like we previously had, so that all of the FAR calculations now, the bonus calculations, are percentage FAR calculations for each bonus. So that's the major change on those. And additionally, and then lastly is the addition of the standard, which we may have to review after tonight's, the standard which reads, the specific contribution or improvements proposed are determined to be a benefit to the city. Those are in the first line item of the standards for the public benefit bonuses. So I open it up for questions.
Could you perhaps go over the maybe one or two examples of the specific changes on the FAR calculations?
Item 3, page 13, inclusionary housing, which I've provided an example on your desk tonight for. bonus floor area ratio equals floor area of qualifying inclusionary housing divided by lot area times 0.4 times base FAR.
That's on page 15 in the draft that's marked up.
Okay.
You like the way I led you on that, right? I led you on
Yeah.
that. You like that?
And so I provided you with, like we had for the previous FAR bonus, I provided you this sheet tonight for an example of that. And essentially, the proposed bonus change is finished floor area divided by the total lot area times 0.4 times the base FAR. Sorry, to make sure that was correct.
Is there a comparison for the old here?
If you look at the markup on page 15 of the marked up plan,
I got that.
you wanted a comparison of how the old one didn't work because it was a square footage allotment. It wasn't a percentage of bonus FAR.
It mixed square footage with a multiplier that was set up for FAR, and when one attempted to calculate it,
You couldn't calculate it.
Didn't make sense.
it resulted in silly numbers.
Thank you. And okay.
So again, it's realigning everything to ensure that we're talking apples to apples here, and a developer understands apples to apples in these examples. One other significant change is to the whole building sustainability, which would be page 14 on the markup.
Can I interrupt one?
Yes, sir.
Ask one question? And these still will all then fall within the maximum allowable heights. You ran all those calculations to make sure everything.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually it works out better because this has a good cap to it.
It's also written so the maximum controls over the individual calculations.
Page 12 of the do we want to do markup or
Markup.
Markup.
14 on the markup.
Page 14 of the markup, item B, we changed that, and I propose to further that change to say commitment to and execution of LEED Gold certification or city administered equivalent sustainable rating equals 15% increase. And what that does is it shows that there's that follow through, not just the commitment to, but the follow through of that construction. And then also additionally, commitment to an execution of LEED Platinum certification or city administered equivalent sustainable rating equals a 25% increase in bonus FAR.
And how does this relate to the ordinance, the green building ordinance here in Evanston?
They have to follow the green building ordinance as one of the standards for compliance.
I need to reread that ordinance. Isn't there something in the
Correct.
ordinance that says all new buildings?
In the
Go ahead.
marked copy that I have, the execution of is missing.
Yes, I propose to change. There's a small change to that tonight
But-
that I'd like to include in our
I
proposed
think
changes.
that's an excellent change.
Ken Cox, City's Law Department. Commissioner Freeman, your question actually is pretty timely. There's going to be on Monday night's council agenda an ordinance that's going to codify and propose a few amendments to the green building ordinance.
Right.
The base is that all new construction or additions of at least 10,000 square feet shall achieve LEED Silver or a city administered equivalent. And the bonuses here are if you reach gold or platinum, which
Right.
exceed the base green building ordinance requirements.
Do we need to perhaps look at the bonuses since we are now requiring silver? So to do any type of development here, you have to get silver anyway. So, do we need to look at percentages to get to the next levels, or should we still leave them where they're at?
And that's what these percentages are. If you achieve a LEED Gold, you get a 15% bump.
I know,
in your bonus.
but the point is, when we wrote this, there was no requirement to have any type of LEED certification, right? So when we did when we were doing these bonuses, was it 2 years ago? Was that when we were writing these? There was no requirement by the city that you had to have any type of certification. And isn't that correct? And the bonuses themselves are designed to encourage certification. Now that you have to have silver at above a certain height, or is it square footage, or so there is a certain amount of work that has to be done now by default that to even build here. By now having a 25% bonus for platinum, and you already had to do whatever it took to get to silver, we were taking that into account into these bonuses.
Craig,
am I making sense?
You're asking, are the percentages justifiable?
Yeah.
And I think Craig, as part of his preparation for tonight, looked at that question.
Yeah, to achieve it, and correct me if
about-
I'm wrong here, Commissioner Galloway, is to achieve a LEED Silver rating these days is the actual improvements is much less than what it used to be because of advances in technology. To achieve a LEED Platinum it's a much more significant workload and application, and so the rewarding of that of 25%, in my professional opinion, is justified.
I mean, understand, I'm a layman. I have a business background, and so I want to understand the justification for that. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah,
I do not have the background that these gentlemen do.
There are a lot of buildings. Oh, sorry.
Do members of the commission want to speak to this? Go ahead.
Yeah. I think one of the things, I understand where you're coming from, but I think one of the things we have to remember is as we start getting into gold and platinum, the cost increases significantly, or relatively significantly. And the idea behind the bonus is to spread that cost over more square footage to either be sold or leased. So I think that what we're really trying to do is encourage the higher level of certification, and at the same time provide a mechanism by which the contractor can help pay for it. So in that regard, I still think that this probably is appropriate.
And at the same time, if silver has become significantly less expensive, I'm assuming gold and platinum has come down as well.
Correct. I mean,
I don't know.
There's still significant work, but it's not. You're looking at maybe a 15% increase on cost or more.
David Galloway, do you want to address this?
For the most part, since so many building material suppliers have jumped on the green bandwagon, LEED Silver consequently has been much easier to attain because products that are green and will contribute to points for it are much more readily available. Moving up into gold and silver requires a significantly more effort. So I think that these percentages are reasonable, and they serve both ends as both goals, as Larry articulated.
Okay.
Is this a typo? Paragraph D on page 10 on the marked up copy, referring to table 611. S 611-119D.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any more questions about whole building sustainability?
Thank you.
Okay.
For indulging me.
No problem.
I hear one more commissioner with a question. Oh, okay.
Moving on to affordable office space, page 16. Again, this is a change to the FAR calculation in that we're aligning it with FAR percentage bonuses and not square footage allotments. And it looks very similar to the inclusionary housing calculation. Questions? And then the last major change that I want to point out is that we took out item 10, page 30 of your markup. We took out all of the facade criteria, the facade improvement criteria, and changed this to a contribution to the facade improvement fund and not a renovation component. And that's open for discussion.
Commissioners?
I had an issue originally on this whole one, on the facade improvement.
And again, our attempt is to make these more clear in what we're doing here, and a contribution to the fund allows us to grant a bonus easier than ensuring that they, like Commissioner Peters had stated, that they will do the renovation, but it may be 2 years or 3 or more.
You know, and you know, on the Economic Development Committee, we grant money out of that fund for improvements, facade improvements, and you know, I mean, I question whether there's a real public benefit to increase the height of buildings based on giving a property owner some money to improve the facade of their building. You know, that's a short-term and in many respects very short-term public benefit to improve a storefront versus the long-term benefit to a building owner to go up a couple extra stories. So I question this benefit in general, and I did back then, but I'm probably more adamant about it today because I have more experience, and I don't think it's something we can change at this point, but that's just my opinion.
Mr. Galloway?
Well, I don't believe we can change it since it's already incorporated into the downtown
That's what I
plan.
said.
But I really don't, I don't see this as significantly different than a financial contribution made to the preservation fund. I've worked with the city on some facade improvements of rather modest buildings in the past, and I can tell you any money that the city can contribute to some of these business owners is extremely valuable, and it not only improves their building, but it also improves the streetscape.
I agree. I was commenting from a perspective of the long-term viability of those facade changes, and as new owners come into buildings, those facade changes may be changed within a couple years versus the long-term impact of the building that got the bonuses. But this is not the time to be debating these, and I apologize.
I have two small revisions that have come up since page 23 of your markup. I propose item C4. Restoration projects must be consistent with section 2-9-9. I propose to change this to restoration projects shall comply with the requirements of Title II, Section 9 of the City Code.
Page
as
23.
As amended. Sorry about that. Title II, Chapter 9.
Craig, what's the reason for that?
Does that encompass the previously referenced
Correct.
standard?
And
Okay.
it's to ensure that should anything change, it's compliant to the changes. And then one small minor change on page 20. Sorry, I had different pages here.
Hides. Go ahead.
Page 37, off-street parking. We have an asterisk notation that reads, currently, if the parking is fully enclosed. There was a recommendation to change that to no setback is required if the parking area, and the rest of the sentence, so that it's clear as to what that refers to.
I'm sorry, would you read the corrected language then,
Yes,
please?
no setback is required if the parking area is fully enclosed and has an architectural treatment, parens, including building materials, that is consistent with the architecture and materials used in the remainder of the building. And that has to do with above-ground parking. And those are all my changes today.
Do the commissioners have any other comments about the draft as changed during the discussion tonight? Go ahead.
I have a few minor things. If we can turn to page 9.
What's it called?
611-19, public benefits bonuses. The second to last sentence of the first paragraph, the city shall award additional floor area ratio and building height for public benefits that meet specified standards. In some instances, we call these criteria standards, in some cases requirements. Should we have both words there? Or should all of the first paragraphs in each of the section use consistently one of those words? When I was reading through those paragraphs in each of the sections, sometimes standards made more sense and sometimes requirements. A standard may have something to do with the specific way in which something is executed, and a requirement may refer to a process. So I'll leave that to Mr. Cox to decide. That's just a comment on my part at this point. Stuart?
I think it's very important to standardize language throughout this whole public benefit portion. There's a lot of places where the language is not consistent, and I think that's got to be tightened up. But referring now to the paragraph that you just mentioned, David, it says the city shall award additional floor space. Now, I assume that we're going to have to change that word to may, and that's another thing where we have to have some consistency throughout.
That was the subject of the earlier motion.
Yeah, good, okay.
Pardon me, again, Ken Cox from the city's law department. After the commission has made its final recommendations regarding the downtown text amendment and downtown map amendments, the law department and community and economic development department will work to put these into final ordinance forms before they're sent to planning and development committee of the city council. We'll endeavor then to make sure that the language is as uniform as possible, and also give effect to the earlier motion regarding the mayor shall language to make sure that the documents aren't internally inconsistent.
Thank you, Galloway. Then the public benefit feature list, can those be put in the same order as they are in the downtown plan on page 101?
Yes, as in my memo for...
I think that's yours, Stuart.
Outline.
City Council.
Commissioner Gordon.
Does anybody here need a mortgage loan?
purposes of this meeting, to ensure that there was a consistency and everybody understanding the public benefit bonuses, we did not reorder them. We will reorder them to be consistent with the plan when it goes to Planning and Development Committee, the City Council.
Okay, then I assume then that will also affect the order in which they're placed in here and the relative numbers assigned to them then too. Okay. If I can question on page 11 would be paragraph E1A2. Page 11.
Page 11.
Paragraph E1A2. The last sentence, floor area ratio bonuses may not be granted for tandem parking spaces. I was just wondering if we need to include some language in there that explains when they might be granted, such as the examples that we talked about wherein a condo provides tandem parking spaces to the owner of a unit, such that one owner would own both tandem spaces.
So the suggestion is to add an exception to this language.
Well, I'm just wondering,
Why?
I don't know whether it's necessary or not, but that was the only instance in which I could think of a case where we might be inclined to accept tandem spaces. And I'm just throwing it out there as to whether we think that example needs to be included here so that the developer doesn't go down a path that he doesn't need to go down.
Commissioner, forgive me if I don't recall that part of the conversation in the meeting that we had. However, now that you raise the issue, my first concern is, suppose you have, let's say we're talking about a residential development, and you say owners, let's say we're talking about condos. So we have a condo development, and 2 tandem spaces are sold along with one particular unit. There would be there would be nothing in this document that could prevent that unit owner from then selling one of those spaces to a third party who doesn't even occupy the building. So I would just propose that as a factor for your consideration when deciding whether or not to extend the bonus to tandem parking spaces.
So perhaps it's better left just as written.
I would agree.
Yeah. And then I'm wondering, on page 15, inclusionary housing, why do we not include the word affordable in the title of this section when it's included in the content of the text? Is that intentional for some reason?
I believe this goes back to Commissioner Updike's mention before of standardizing language.
Okay.
Originally, I believe it was called affordable housing. However,
Yeah.
the codified ordinance that we have is called the inclusionary zoning or housing ordinance. So I think there was an attempt here to capture the language that already exists in Title V of the City Code. We could use one or the other, and if you have a particular preference or recommendation, then we'd certainly take it and just standardize in that direction.
I like having affordable housing in there, to be honest with you.
Well, that's the intention.
That's
So
correct.
I
So,
prefer to see the word there.
you know, to me, inclusionary could also be you're including for special needs. You know, for education, it's used. Inclusion is used in that manner. So I know this is different, but you know, I'm a layman, and so so I think you should have affordable in there.
Other commissioners?
I would defer to recommendation from legal on that.
Law Department doesn't have a strong feeling either way, in that if you look just further down the page, 3A, Roman numeral 1, it makes reference to Title V, Chapter 7, which is titled Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. So I think that clarifies what exactly we mean when we say inclusionary. However, if you would like it to be more explicit at a glance, we certainly could expand the language.
Any other commissioners?
Well, it doesn't hurt to have it over there, and I think it's.
Oh, it sounds to me like there's a general consensus to add the word affordable after inclusionary.
Okay, and then I have a question. At one point in time, I know that we were talking about a public benefit bonus being granted if a financial contribution was made to a fund, a city fund that might provide affordable housing. That's not in here, and I don't recall whether we intentionally removed that.
I don't think we ever codified that.
Other commissioners have any recollection? I know that we had talked about it, and I know that many planned developments have come before us in the past where that has been one of their options, either providing it on site or giving the city money that they can put into a fund to do with as they wish as it relates to affordable housing.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
There's nothing in the plan itself that precludes this, and it doesn't say that it has to be on site, for example. It says floor area bonuses for affordable housing are intended to promote private sector participation in helping meet the city's affordable housing needs, but it doesn't say that it has to be on site.
What does the ordinance say?
The inclusionary zoning ordinance does permit developers to make a contribution in lieu of building on site. However, just as a practical matter, the inclusionary zoning ordinance, housing ordinance Title V, Chapter 7, speaks in numbers of units. It doesn't speak about square footage or floor area ratio. If it's 10% of owner-occupied 10% of owner-occupied units in essentially planned developments, developments of 25 units or greater, must include 10% on site, or they can make I believe it's $40,000 per unit contribution to the, and I can't recall the exact name of the fund, but the fund. The issue here is that we're speaking about a floor area ratio bonus, and we don't have an easy or at least ready conversion factor that would allow for that how we would calculate exactly what number of dollars would be worth what floor area ratio bonus. If it's the will of the commission, we could take the additional time to create one. However, that would be a new step and would require additional staff time and time for the commission to consider.
Dennis?
Yes, thank you. If I could add to Ken's comments, the funds that are fee and lieu end up in the Affordable Housing Fund, is what it's called. Our biggest challenge has actually been to get developers to build affordable housing on site of the planned development. Nearly all, and perhaps all so far, that have been subject to the inclusionary ordinance have done the fee and lieu at $40,000 a unit. $40,000 in terms of required units.
Can you maybe, do you have any insight as to why they do that?
I don't have any scientific insight or research based on that, but I think it's easier to do the fee and lieu. Sometimes, they may have certain needs in terms of configuration of units that may or may not be suitable for families. Sometimes is an issue. High-rise, mid-rise versus low-rise could be an issue as well. But bottom line, it's easier to do the fee and lieu than it is to do it on site.
Go ahead.
My recommendation. Sorry.
Just, I think part of that comes from Tom Rozak's experience over here and whenever he calls that project that got half completed. At any rate, he tried to include low-income housing units in his in that as they constructed those, and he couldn't sell any.
Which was this? Where was this?
Sienna.
Right.
And he had a hard time. He couldn't really sell any, I think, because at the construction cost, what they were finding was the unit was too small for most people who needed low-income housing. So I think that was probably one of the driving forces behind that.
My recollection of discussions about affordable housing as it relates to the downtown plan were that we wanted affordable housing units in the downtown to provide for those individuals such as policemen, firemen, starting teachers and so forth to have a place to reside in the downtown. But I don't think there's any language in here that says that this affordable housing must be in the project that they are proposing. So if we're simply going to encourage them to provide affordable housing on the site, we need to be specific about that, I think, unless I'm missing it. And if we don't want...
Look at Roman numeral AI. Roman numeral I.
Within, yeah.
I'm sorry, within the proposed project. Okay, I beg your pardon. Okay. Sorry. And then typically I'm wondering if it wouldn't be beneficial to include examples of any of the FAR calculations at the end of each of these sections so that there's no question in the part of the mind of any developer, here's your cartoon that explains what we just told you in verbal fashion. I would suggest that. I know we talked about that. I think that would be beneficial.
Let's go back a minute to the questions on off-site, on-site. I assume that there's no change from the text here that we're talking about if we approve the text. On-site affordable housing. Okay.
Should we have a fee in lieu option? I think that might be a good idea.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
Not if we want to have, from all the evidence, that if we want to have inclusionary housing on site, then no, we shouldn't have it. Because we've just been informed that all development is now contributing the $40,000 to the fund. Is that correct, Dennis? Isn't that what you just told us?
Certainly, all development that I can think of that complies with the inclusionary housing ordinance, none of it has done it on site, to my recollection.
So it depends what the goal is. So if the goal is to truly have inclusionary housing in new developments, then I would say no. We wouldn't want to have a fee in lieu of.
Right?
Two items to that. One is this is a higher FAR bonus. It's a 15% bonus in FAR. And two, in our chart that shows the public benefit bonuses up front, we actually use the words on-site inclusionary housing. So I would amend to add that to the beginning of the detailed public benefit bonus as well.
Is there consensus on that?
Okay.
And we can move on.
Well, I do have a question. In the case of Mr. Rozek, would that made a difference in your opinion, Larry?
I don't know. It might have, only in that, with the 15% bonus, again, you're able to spread that cost over more square footage. They might have been able to build larger units that would have been attractive. The bottom line on this is going to be, when a developer looks at all this, they're going to run numbers. And if it looks like they can do it and make money at it, they'll do it. And if not, they'll skip that one and go on to the next. So I think if the idea is to at least try to encourage it, then I think that's good. And then if nobody ever uses it, take another look at it. That goes back to my idea that, over time, you're going to be relooking at these anyway from time to time. So.
Mr. Galloway, do you have other?
Yes. Page 17, please. Public park open space improvements. As I understand it here, the three options for our applicant are he can donate land or or contribute land to the city. He can contribute cash to the city for their use, or he can provide improvements to a specific property. And I still think that the language in the 5A isn't that clear. That is the introductory paragraph that describes what the options are, and I don't think it's particularly clear, and it needs to have better reference to 5A3. which I think is misidentified as I-II. Contributions of land, that would be 3, correct? And then applicants below would be 4.
Do you think that problem is cured by the change allowing discretion?
On the part of,
I mean, if the bonuses are discretionary, then the commission and the council will clarify what the bonus is and what's being done and when.
I don't think, my problem is just with the language. I don't think it's clear enough as to what the options are. That he can provide property, he can provide cash to the city, or he can propose specific improvements to property that isn't owned by him, correct?
So do you propose to put that in the first paragraph?
Yeah.
Is there any comments about adding that language?
I think it's very difficult to describe every possible scenario, and I'm not troubled by the general language here, and I'm somewhat reassured by the fact that the Planning Commission and indeed the Council has some discretion, so they've got some room to move here without having to specify every contingency or every scenario.
Good point, Stuart.
I give the developers credit to believe they'll read past the title.
Very well. Now, on item 3, where we describe the kinds of documents that we want the applicant to submit, typically can we say appropriate design drawings, detailed construction documents, and commitments?
You wish to add the word design?
Design before drawings, between appropriate and drawings, and then the words construction documents after detailed, and then also the word and then before commitments.
Is there any objection to that language?
And my recommendation that would be consistent wherever we use that kind of, wherever we use that paragraph in subsequent bonuses.
Tell me again what it is you want to see there.
I want it to read, applicants who contribute improvements and who will be undertaking the work themselves must submit documentation, including but not limited to appropriate design drawings, detailed construction documents, and commitments, comma, et cetera.
On page 17, Roman numeral 8, section A3. No objection. Go ahead.
Improvements. Page 26, paragraph 8C6. Here again, similar to what I just mentioned before, appropriate design drawings. That's page 26. Appropriate design drawings.
Well, it says drawings. You want design?
Mm-hmm. And then I believe 7 is a duplication of that and can be removed.
Where's the duplication? not a duplication.
That's the description of.
I'm sorry. Okay. And then lastly on page, I don't know if we're getting into this section yet, or maybe I'm leaping ahead, 47. Bottom of the page, item 4, facade articulation. Facades exceeding 50 feet in width must be vertically divided into bays or other segments no more than 30 feet in width. I'm a little uneasy about that. I know what the intent is, but I'm a little uncomfortable with suggesting to an architectural designer that these are the points at which we need to articulate the facade. So,
what do you suggest?
But aesthetically realistic.
Well, can we insert the word approximately?
Where do you want to insert it?
Bays or
before
other
the 30?
segments.
Before the 30 or? That's why he's working on this.
And this comes directly out of the plan, right? I did not compare all this to the plan, only the issues that I was concerned about. But I think this is. What? I'm sorry?
I'm just willing to bet that we did not create it.
Right.
Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it. I think it can be worked.
Okay, worked around.
All right.
It's on page 96 of the plan.
Are there comments from commissioners or staff on other provisions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one. On page 16, on affordable office space, A2, we say the lease rate for affordable office space must be at or below the median Class B office rents. I would like that should be changed to net office rents. Because if I look in CoStar, some are net, some are gross and include operating expenses or taxes. And what you're trying to do, and the taxes may vary on a property, the operating expense may vary on a property. You're trying to get down to the baseline rent. So I wouldn't, the only way to it's net rents, yes. That's the only way to get around that debate.
Any other comments from the commission? Go ahead.
Good evening, Dominic Argametto, zoning planner. Hope all is well. I just like to synthesize discussion staff had this morning with concerned citizens, Andrew McGonigal, some edits right here, showing how dangerously close we are to proving our meeting was 15 to 20 minutes, and 5 of that was talking about his glasses. So we are approaching closer and closer, but I'd just like to go over some of these edits that we put in here. And I'll be working from the non-red line edition. I apologize, I didn't know we'd be working from the red line edition, but the non-red line edition. Thank you. As we go through. On page 7, of the document, numbers 6, 7, and 9, when we're talking about walkways, vehicular access, and stormwater, we talk about acceptable design and constructions. As we do later in the document, we reference the Public Works Department's policies, guidelines, and regulations as updated. Staff agrees that we should also reference that document in this area so that we know how they're being approved. Just so how we know these walkways, vehicular access, and stormwater are being approved, and that codifies the standard.
Can you point to the language you're talking about?
Yes, on page 10, E3, E1A3, it says the entrance to and exit of parking garage or loading docks is to be located off an alley when determined feasible by the city engineer per the Public Works Department's policies, guidelines, and regulations is updated. Back on page 7, we talk about the development provides walkways. For example, on page 7, number 6, the development provides walkways that form a logical, safe, and convenient system for pedestrians to access all project facilities and off-site destinations, and we'll reference the Public Works Department's policies, guidelines, and regulations. We'll do that in where it talks about vehicular access and stormwater as well in this document.
Dominic, while we're on that page.
Yes, sir.
I believe we requested that item 8, that starts, the development provides, if possible, for underground installation. Didn't we want to change the word possible to feasible?
Yes, and we will make that correction. On page 8 of the non-red line document, again, we'll be making the corrections as we was discussed tonight. Throughout the document, when discussing public benefit bonuses, we reference an ordinance, an agreement, and we always say an agreement that also includes penalties if it's not approved. Here in the first paragraph, in the very long sentence, midway through it, basically on the line, it starts with heights. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th line down. It says height to projects meeting specific objective standards, and only for the length of time that those projects to continue to meet those standards, or otherwise penalty inquired, or the standard language we've used throughout the document. So it's putting in that there are penalties for not meeting these up front in the document and not just in each standard.
Do you want to put it at that point, or do you want to put it as a separate paragraph underneath that first paragraph?
I think we're open to suggestion. We want it up front, though.
I think it's good in the first paragraph.
Mm-hmm. So we'll do that.
Might need a separate sentence, but...
Yeah. Might need, yes. I think Microsoft Word would probably agree with you. On that same page for A1, staff, citizens, and legal all agree that where we say only buildings that meet the green building ordinance, and then we put the ordinance number, we need to have as amended or updated. Otherwise, it becomes kind of a dead right there. Many times throughout, now we'll jump to page 15.
Are these still Andrew's comments?
They're comments we've agreed with. Andrew will speak to a couple that, there are about 2 or 3 points that staff didn't.
Let's refer to these later as Dominic's comments.
I think we should refer to them as staff comments, not one for my name. I'm part of the team, so I feel good about that. 5A.
But these came during your conversation
Right.
with Andrew.
Right.
His glasses.
And his glasses, correct. On page 15, 5A, 3, 4. It's listed as 4. I'm sorry, it's listed as 4. It should be 5. And this occurs throughout the public benefits. So this will be the only time I mention it, because as we've talked about, we'll standardize the language. We say applicants who make a contribution in lieu of specific improvements that are to be undertaken by city agencies must enter in an agreement with the city of Evanston. Instead, it should say must enter into an agreement by ordinance. It's just making it more official as we go through. Again, that's throughout the document. on page 22, D, bullet point 2, it says total project cost. I believe before we were saying total construction cost. And was it Mr. Galloway who suggested project cost? And wondering for consistency, because we had talked about basing FAR bonuses off of construction cost, and now we're using project cost. I think it goes back to the desire to have consistent language throughout.
Aren't they two different things?
That's what we're...
I'm sorry, Dominic, where are you?
On a clean copy, non-red line copy, page 22, D2.
Here.
We're talking about streetscape and or alley improvements.
Not in.
And what do we predominantly use as a construction cost?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
I think there are...
Dominic, do you have those defined?
Construction costs?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we do have
And the
them.
reason I say that, I'm concerned, I would be a little concerned that construction costs would be the hard costs, and project cost would include soft costs.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if we have it explicitly defined. Do you know?
So I think you're going to get into some debates over time unless you've got that.
What's the
Define.
intent?
I'm not sure what the intent is. I'm just concerned about the definition and
Yeah, I
who's
agree.
going to argue
Could-
what.
Could I clarify, estimated construction cost, we had a conversation with Walter Hallen, our project management supervisor, and the memo was included in your Plan Commission packet. Total construction cost is thoroughly reviewed and is the hard cost for the development. So project costs could include the soft costs as well, which is something to consider.
Nevertheless, Larry raises a good point. Is there any place in the preface to this whole document where we stipulate or state that so that there's no question?
What the intent is, project versus...
No, we don't mention project. Is there a need to define construction cost? But we don't want to talk about project cost. I thought that was the change. Weren't we changing the word from project to construction? Is that right? Or
I
no?
think we want a
Yeah,
consistent,
that's what I think.
consistent definition, so I believe we were going with construction, no?
Yes, exactly.
Larry, did you have a suggestion for the definition of construction?
I'll let our city engineer define it. It's just that if we have a definition of what's included, we won't get into debates later on where soft costs fit.
I don't know that we have a definition necessarily in the zoning ordinance. However, again, speaking to the green building ordinance, in their construction, I think we call it construction value, in those definitions, speak to the amount that essentially is attached to the building permit. So that would not include things like land acquisition and the like. So we could import that definition into this portion of the zoning ordinance. We could just copy the language.
Mr. Steele?
Well, usually in construction, when we say construction cost, we are referring to the actual amount that it costs to construct the project. We don't include the soft costs. So I think if you want to capture more money, you may want to include project. You may want to say project so you can get more out of it, because the actual construction cost is actually lower than the project cost.
You also use the project costs in multiple locations in this document.
Yes, I believe that came about through incorporating comments from the various memos we received. And
What is the plan? Is it in the downtown plan itself?
It is not, because this is one of those FAR changes that we've had to make over time to ensure that the calculations are correct. So this is a calculation bonus that staff has actually created for this specific document.
And when we say
Does
staff, we mean working with...
Did staff take into consideration when they did this, whether it should just be the hard costs or or the total cost of bringing it to the table and up?
I'm the one that actually worked a lot on this, and my initial thoughts on construction cost are it's an easier metric for the permitting department and city staff to help work through during this public benefit process, and that it ties the success of the building to, or the construction of the building to an actual number over time. So we didn't really consider soft costs, but it is something we can look at. But the initial concept was you're building a building. What is the cost of actually building that building versus the total soft costs as well?
Go ahead, Mr. Galloway.
I'd be disinclined to use any other terminology other than construction cost, which is the cost that is going to be included on the permit. And I don't think we should get into the bailiwick of soft costs, because as Walter stated in his memo, and as he stated to me in discussions I've had with him, he seems perfectly comfortable evaluating the estimated construction cost of an applicant's project and verifying it. So I think we should use the phraseology construction cost.
What is the average percent of the total cost of our project is soft costs? Is there an average? 65-30. So 35% is soft. So that's a big percent of the total cost of the project.
This is one of the areas, actually, where I think over time it'll be necessary to go back and see how these formulas are working, and it'll depend on the market conditions. I think you all, before I got here and since I've been on the commission, have endeavored to make reasonable formula, but we don't know with certainty how the market will respond.
Do we have other standards that are used in Chicago? You've looked at these standards. So are they using, other cities? Are they using project or are they using construction?
Again, this is very unique to us. A lot of them use the market rate rent, market land value times a percentage point. They don't really tie a bonus FAR to the total cost contribution that equals a percentage of the construction cost. It's a formula that city staff developed here.
I mean, the difficulty is measuring the soft costs.
Understood.
If you chose that approach.
I understand.
And is it any of the city's business as to what an applicant's soft costs are? I don't think so. I mean,
if we are so unique, why did we determine that this is the manner for us to develop these? Why do we choose this manner versus what other cities do?
I think when we started this, the whole idea is to provide some balance between certainty for the developer and some very rather specific ways to increase a property. The hope by doing this is that we will reduce soft costs, because anybody who sat through some of the planned development discussions a few years ago will remember the number of meetings where lawyers were involved, the number of times that architects went back and recreated new drawings and recreated new designs, all of that significantly increasing the soft cost. So one of our objectives here was to try to accomplish what we're a pro-development atmosphere, reducing soft costs and still giving the city some control as to that they're getting something the city wants. That was what we're trying to do it.
Not why we chose project versus soft versus project versus construction, but why we didn't look at the percentages based on, you're saying, land costs or?
Part of that is city administration of these bonus calculations. If you look at the original bonus calculation for landmark preservation, which is in line with what we were just talking about Floor area bonuses for qualifying activities are to be based on financial contributions that reflect the value of property within the geographic area based on the following formula. Cost of 1 square foot of floor area equals 80% times median cost of land per buildable square foot. And when we continue to look at that formula, how to continually administer that calculation is it's a more moving target than here's what your total construction cost is, and a percentage of that total construction cost is equal to 1% of a bonus FAR. We tried to simplify that procedure. We already have an exhaustive review of construction costs during the permitting process of any building, and it allows us to help the developer understand when he's looking for bonus FAR, how much he can actually contribute and get that bonus FAR.
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue here, Seth.
I got it.
Recalling how the word project may have gotten inserted in there, it may have been inserted because someone may have been concerned that construction only referred to the building and maybe at the exclusion of site work and so forth, some of it. But I think our real intent always was that we were talking about the construction cost.
And depending on the quality of the building and the quality of the construction, one building, the bonuses might cost them less than the other building. Whereas if you tie it back to what the original thing is, then it's pretty even across the board per developer. Is that correct?
I didn't understand that.
I don't know how you reach that.
Well, the construction cost can vary depending whether you're putting up a luxury high-rise or or not, correct?
But it's always respectful of the scope of the work.
Yes, but there's no comparison between construction projects. It's per construction project, whereas the other way is based on the average of what the property values are in the area, correct? We can take this offline.
I don't know, but I don't think we want to go there.
Okay, we can take this offline.
If we can't even understand what we're talking about, I don't know how the city or anyone's going to be able to put that into a discernible formula.
As I interpret the original calculation, it goes back to that square footage allotment versus bonus FAR percentage allotment, which is what we tried to make sure every bonus had was a percentage bonus FAR instead of square footage allotment.
Understood.
Dominic?
The next one is from legal. It's on page 31 of the non-red line copy. This is something that is almost a preamble to what will be appearing at the next zoning committee meeting, and that is the necessity to have religious institution, membership organization, and cultural facility zoned the same. In the downtown traditional district, currently we have cultural facility and membership organization as permitted uses, and we have religious institution as a special use. After the long discussion that's been in front of City Council, where it was understanding about religious institution being special use, the recommendation here is to make cultural facility and membership organization special uses also, so that they are consistent with a religious institution in this district.
So are we supposed to
Is there a general agreement
motion
with
on
that?
that? Is that what you'd like on that?
I would.
I think that if there's general agreement, we'll just incorporate it. And it was cultural facility and
Membership organization.
I strongly support that.
Can someone tell me where that is in the red line document, please? 39? Thank you.
The final point I'd like to make in my presentation is on regarding DC, the downtown core uses, on page 36 of the non-red line copy. Following up on a question that was at the last meeting regarding warehouse establishment and a wholesale goods establishment in the DC2 zone. whether these should be special uses or whether they were permitted uses coming out of the former RP district, Research Park District. Again, combining planning that this staff is proposing and also looking back at the text from the April meeting where this was originally discussed, staff recommends that this remain a special use. At the April meeting, it was discussed about warehouses that may exist currently in that district are accessory uses, which are secondary to another use in that district. Secondly, warehouse establishment and wholesale good establishments are definitely, we're talking about a downtown core district now, and they're here primarily because they were part of the RP district. This is not eliminating them, but if they were to somehow go in there or a viable use, I definitely think that due to intensity of use, oversight would want to be shown, and it would not want to be a by right project in any way. Also, allowing that to be a special use in the DC2 district allows it to not be an allowable use in the DC1 and DC3 districts to kind of show a symmetry of the downtown core district overall. So through staff review and of our previous transcripts and discussion among staff, we recommend that stay as a special use in this draft.
So you're talking about not making a change?
Not making a change, but explaining why that existed as was directed by the last Plan Commission meeting. So that incorporates comments from citizens, legal department, and staff that I have to bring forward.
Any comments from the commissioners? Anything else from staff before we hear from the public? Anyone in the public wish to?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Andrew? Can you identify yourself for the record, and you have been served as a witness?
My name's Andrew McGonigal. I live at 2526 Princeton Avenue. I would like to say that I actually had a very good meeting with Dominic this morning, and it was actually his question that led to the discussion on my glasses. I just wanted to clarify that.
They are nice new glasses.
Thank you. Many of the items that we discussed this morning have been brought forward with Dominic. There are a couple that have come up since further discussion, and there are some of the other items that he has deferred to me to go through. One of the things that I would like to say, I understand the procedure and the protocol of letting the commission members speak and then the staff speak. One of the things that's a little difficult as a member of public listening to a lot of your discussion is that on two areas there are things that I felt I could have offered assistance on. And as a consequence, the quality of debate that was given, I think, could have been enhanced by additional comment and recollections of previous meetings. So as a member of the public, that becomes very difficult to now go back to those points and to reiterate those items that you already have passed an opinion on. So I apologize for going back to those points, but I feel it's important that we do so.
We'd like to hear your comments.
Okay. The first one actually relates to something that I brought up with Dominic earlier, and that was the additional verbiage concerning the City Council language being inserted, and it relates to the word may.
Can you give us a page number?
The comment that you actually passed a resolution on
Okay.
when. The resolution that you actually passed excluded the verbiage, the word may, and the second part of the sentences that Stuart so eloquently read out. I think you need to go back and revisit that, having spent such great time actually going through it, to make that word may actually appear. So I
think that's what people voted in favor of.
No, you voted in favor of it, but the piece that you voted in favor of was the first part of the sentence, or the first part of the paragraph, not the second sentence. And the second sentence was the word that actually had the word may in it.
I don't have it in front of me. Let's look and see what.
Is this on page 112, the one that I recited?
It was the one that you read from the plan where you passed at the city council.
I would agree with you, but the motion included changes of the word shall to the word may.
Right, but the piece that you missed out, you read the first paragraph, you didn't pass a motion on the second part of the paragraph, which actually was where the word was included. Whether city council, whether staff would like to read that back as transcript, but I think...
Okay.
I wrote it as verbatim as I could. Motion to include section 6.2 decision-making criteria from the downtown plan to the downtown zoning document, and removing the word shall in the document. That was the motion.
But not replacing it with may. Is that what your point is?
Right. The point is that the document says may. You discussed may, you said everything about may. When you read the motion, you excluded the second sentence, which had the word may in it. To me, that's a fundamental issue.
I think it's implied by the process. If we don't say shall, and we say what the criteria is, I think it's everything else there is implied. And to add the rest of that paragraph constrains the council. And the intent was to not constrain the council, which is why I suggest
Could you read the sentence, the paragraph again, please, if you wouldn't mind?
In acting on requested FLORIA bonuses, and that's, the Plan Commission and City Council must evaluate the proposed amenities based on their contribution to and the degree to which they enhance the quality of life and benefit the public in the surrounding area.
Correct.
And the City Council there is approving or not approving. And without the additional language and with the changes to the word may, I think the interpretation is they may approve or they may disapprove. I don't know how else you can interpret it.
Yeah. As long as everybody's happy with it.
Gentlemen, ladies? Gentleman and lady, I guess.
Well, there's that one last sentence which does say, for FLORIA bonus may be approved, if they.
I think the whole procedure, if you take out the words that we've done elsewhere that limit discretion, I think the whole procedure is about approving or not approving.
And we will see a draft of this next meeting, I take it.
I'm hoping we can approve it with the changes we've talked about tonight and send it to Planning and Development.
I see. Okay.
We have a legal opinion there?
I wouldn't go so far as to call it a definite opinion. The one thing I would say is if the motion was to make a deletion, that can be the extent of the motion. However, if there is a desire to make another motion that would make an addition in the place of that which was deleted, the commission may certainly consider that.
I think we added the language that Andrew's not satisfied with, which is the first sentence from 6.2, which is the sentence that says what should be considered, including benefit to the public in the surrounding area, quality of life, and so on and so forth. You think we need to revisit that, or is it clear?
I hesitate to say need. I would just say that given the fact that in the same meeting in which the motion was made, the question was raised as to how to interpret the effect of the motion, that perhaps greater explicitness in the language might be beneficial to future interpretations.
Do you have a suggestion? Or do you want to come back with a suggestion in 2 minutes?
Mr. McGonagall's suggestion of including the language may would make that more explicit, but again, I hesitate to proffer language given the fact that it's the purview of the commissioners to make motions and their substance.
I don't feel strongly about not adding the additional language, if the commission believes that's helpful. The additional language is floor area bonuses may be approved only if they comply with the standards and criteria of this section and are planned, designed, and located to provide public benefits for downtown residents and visitors.
Well,
It leaves off things like the office workers, the employers, and so on, which is why I omitted that language.
My suggestion would be include the phrase may be approved by the city council and then delete the rest of that sentence. I think
you're right. Just add that one sentence at the end of the paragraph. Don't read the rest. Just add that sentence.
So could we then have a reading of the proposed change, Mr. Chairman?
So the suggestion is leave the first sentence as it is.
I don't have a copy of that in front of me, so that's why I'm
add the
asking.
sentence, floor area bonuses may be approved by the city council. So it reads, in acting on requested floor area bonuses, the Plan Commission and the city council must evaluate the proposed amenities based on their contribution to and the degree to which they enhance the quality of life and benefit the public in the surrounding area. Floor area bonuses may be, and it should say, recommended by the Plan Commission and the City Council. I think it's duplicative, but
okay.
Let me send this back to you.
And I have a question. This is being inserted where in the recently red marked document?
This
on
was
page 9?
Right at the very beginning of all the floor area bonuses.
61119?
Yes.
Public benefit bonuses, correct?
Yes.
The word evaluate to me in the first portion of the paragraph tells me you evaluate it, but you don't make a decision. And that's where I run into the difficulty, that everybody may have an opinion, they may not vote on it, they may vote on it, you know, and that's where I have a problem.
It's a strained reading, given the ordinance that provides for approval or disapproval. But let me see if the commission wants to add something.
I would like to see this in the context of 61119.
It would follow the paragraph that's there.
It would follow.
Yeah.
So it would be between the first paragraph and A.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. The Commissioner Updike's comment some time ago about the standardization of language. When I was responding to that, I was stating that when we prepare this in ordinance form after the Commission's made its final recommendations, that we would make sure that the document wasn't internally inconsistent or is internally consistent. The language in 61119 at the very beginning says that cities shall award additional floor area ratio. To say shall and then may thereafter would seem to be inconsistent.
I think we talked. The motion included changing all those to may.
This is that's exactly my point.
And I think that indicates the councils and the Plan Commission are making decisions about that. Does the Commission wish to make further change here? Andrew, do you have others?
Yeah. Yes, I do. The next one, again, is something that has been debated ad nauseum. I was a member of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, which reported to and looked at this whole process. There was a very strong desire that affordable housing be built in the downtown area, and that it should not be built off-site and money should not be contributed elsewhere in the city, that affordable housing was necessary in the downtown area and is a vital component of it, and to make financial contributions elsewhere was to the detriment of what this city was about and where we wish to go. And I think it's imperative that we look at the plan and include that in the manner that it was always envisaged.
I think that's what we did.
That's what we decided, right?
But I just wanted to reiterate that was the position of many people that reported to and felt strongly about it, and that is an area that we need to look at. And again, the same comment goes towards the affordable office area, that those should be dealt in the same manner and not taken off-site somewhere. Those were the two strong points that I'd like to raise. The other points that I have, I can go through quickly. I do have the red line version. I don't have the other version. I'm old and I need to see the two things together. I apologize. If we go to page 9, the public benefit bonuses, item A1. Our buildings, only buildings that meet the green building ordinance as amended, blah, blah, blah. The discussion that I had with city staff this morning was that it should also include the words or more onerous standards or green standards. The city's green ordinance is not all encompassing, and there are things that you can pick and choose from, and there are much stricter types of regulations out there or codifying methods that actually eclipse our green building ordinance and may not actually include the things that were put together in that ordinance. So I felt that it was important that we gave a developer an opportunity that if there was another system that he wished to abide by, that he actually had some flexibility there in getting his additional floor area. And I open that up for discussion.
But the building ordinance is only, and I've read it a while ago, but it only deals with. It only deals with silver, correct?
I think it might be useful to hear your comments and then get discussion. Others?
I don't have a problem with that. The page 15, you discussed the word whether you added inclusionary affordable housing. As I think the current ordinance is actually called inclusionary housing ordinance, maybe a description of the word affordable in the text rather than actually putting it in as a title, which tends to go against the ordinance that's already been granted and is in place.
So you would not include the word affordable?
Not in the title.
Yeah,
because
in the title, right.
But a description within the text that inclusionary housing refers to affordable housing.
Right.
Other comments?
Well, we did decide, though, to put affordable in the title, didn't we?
Yeah. I'm making a list, and when Andrew's done, we'll come back and see what the commission wants to look at.
Page 23. Item C2, the applicant owns or controls the building that will receive the proposed improvement. I would add the words, or the city owns. There are properties in the downtown area that could be enhanced, and I'm sure the city would not be askance at using a developer's money to actually improve their own property, and it would be hard in the press to actually turn down money for an improvement on a city building. Item on the same page, item 4, restoration projects must be consistent with the city code, blah, 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 and city of appropriateness. And I'm saying this needs to be approved by the Preservation Commission. It's no point in meeting the standards if the Historic Preservation Commission doesn't approve it.
I think they are the decision-making body on that. And so this language triggers their review.
But
it has to, my point is it has to be approved by them. They can review it and reject it, so what happens then to the developer?
May I ask legal to respond to this?
When Craig spoke to this before and indicated that we would expand the language to, say, Title II, Chapter 9 of the City Code, that's the entire preservation ordinance, historic preservation ordinance. So it indicates that any project that affects I get this correctly, it affects any portion of a structure that's visible from the public right-of-way has to go before them, receive a certificate of appropriateness, etc. So when one is proposing to acquire an FAR bonus by preserving a landmark building or building within a historic district, one will have to go before the Preservation Commission. And the reason why we propose to expand the language rather than just say Section 299 and to Title II, Chapter 9, is to make clear that no other body besides the Historic Preservation Commission would make that determination, so that it couldn't be interpreted later that the Plan Commission or P&D might do that on their own.
Go ahead.
The next one is on page 26, item 6, following on from David's comments about appropriate design drawings and construction documents, etc. The question that I've got is, who approves these detailed design drawings to enable them to get FAR? Who is it plan and development? Is it site plan review? Discussions were talked about whether it was an acceptable type of development, whether it wasn't, beneficial, not beneficial. So if you're in the process of actually granting additional FAR based upon a pocket park, who actually approves that? And
with the changes made tonight, the Plan Commission makes recommendation on and gets reports and recommendations from staff, and then the City Council is the ultimate authority.
That's fine. So long as it's covered, that's my concern with all of the items that the long discussion about project cost versus construction cost. The only fee that I know that a developer will give up, the only amount of money, is his construction cost. And that is the cost of the construction of the facility. Now, that needs to be expanded to include alley improvements, landscaping, plaza construction. It needs to be anything that requires, in my mind, a building permit. And the only way that the city has of having a hard number is the building permit application. Now, the city also has a process at the end of the process of getting a final certificate of occupancy. And the final certificate of occupancy requires that a sworn statement of the construction costs actually gets finalized. And therefore, if the original permit fee is actually less because of change orders, and God forbid nobody has change orders, we understand, additional monies are paid to the city to compensate for the additional work the city has to do to monitor those things. So I have a couple of observations. One is, if multiple building permits are pulled by the developer for the property, i.e. if he pulls a street permit, an improvement alley permit, or a landscaping permit, all of those need to be included in the determination of the FAR, because it's a physical improvement to the city. And once we agree that FAR, should there be language inserted that once the sworn statement is given to the city for the FCO, that any modification in the amount of money, a percentage has to be paid to the city to commensurate with the change orders or whatever that's actually existed.
Other things?
The page 28, item 9A6. The plaza is visible from and connected to the public way, e.g. sidewalks. I would like to see with an open/accessible connection. My concern is that you can build a pocket park and it's only accessible through the lobby of the building. It may have a sign saying it's a public park and it's open between whatever hours. My concern is that it's formidable to go through a building lobby to get into a park, and it must be, in my mind, an accessible route from the sidewalk to the park, and it must be an accessible route. I don't care whether it's a sidewalk, ramp, lift, or whatever, but it has to be a physical connection from the sidewalk to the property.
Public access is what you're saying.
Yes.
Others?
Going back to page 47, building frontage, item 4, facade articulation. I understand and share Commissioner Galloway's concern about the 30 feet. What I would suggest is that it read as follows. Facades exceeding 50 feet in width must be vertically divided into multiple bays or segments and remove the no more than 30 feet in width. That gives the architect the flexibility to do it and make it sympathetic to the building and not tie him to specific numbers.
Others?
That gentleman covers all of the items that I've got within my document. Thank you.
I see two other members of the public. It's hard to see past the podium, but did you have things you want us to take up? So let me ask for the commission response with respect to the things Andrew has mentioned. Does the commission want to take up providing an alternative approach other than compliance with the green building ordinance? Dominic.
Staff was just concerned on the phrase "or a more onerous document." I was just concerned about a developer saying that this is a more onerous document, and we're having a debate back and forth that these standards became more onerous. If we decide that a new system comes up that we would rather use rather than something, it seems the responsibility of the city to implement that, amend the green building ordinance, or replace it. That was my hesitation of using that language. I understand that systems may evolve, but that language was more onerous. I didn't want a developer debating it. I didn't want this turn into boxing where you have the WBC, IBF, WBO.
Commissioners?
Well, if we were to change it, wouldn't language such as the green building ordinance or another, well, not necessarily more stringent, but another body of standards as the city may determine is desirable?
I don't know how you can administer that.
I'm just throwing it out there as be the language for it. I'm not so sure we should do it. I think we should probably leave it as it is, and unless we foresee at this time, or someone has knowledge right now that that in all likelihood we will take such action when the first project comes before us. I don't know.
And I think we've kind of expanded. Right now, we don't have green building ordinance. We don't have the words "as amended" after it. And right now, we talked about that. It's putting that in, and I think that can help assuage this issue before us. But again, I am in agreement with you in terms of the language really gets convoluted in terms of a more stringent as approved by the city.
Andrew, you weren't advocating that the city might want to apply another ordinance or another body of requirements on certain projects and not on others,
no,
right?
No.
Okay.
No, I was... The concern that I've got is there is an ever greater quest to improve upon green building. And we're seeing that in multiple municipalities throughout the U.S., and Europe is far ahead of us. There are people that say the green ordinance in this city goes too far and restricts people. There are a larger number, a bigger body of people that say the green ordinance actually doesn't go far enough. And so as a consequence, my humble opinion is that we're going to see Leeds disappear because it actually doesn't do anything in my own mind other than change the type of building materials and where you buy them. It doesn't change the fundamentals of design, okay? And this country is going to be in a position where the fundamentals of design have to change, and quite radically so as we age and our children come forth. So I see people wanting to actually go to a different standard, and I see that the items that are contained in our green ordinance, and I know a lot of people have worked very hard in putting that ordinance together, and it's a wish list where you pick one from here and one from there, and it unfortunately, in my mind as a designer, doesn't go sufficiently far in solving the design dilemma that this country is faced with.
Andrew,
So, and you're talking, I'm sorry.
Andrew, I think you're right, but this is a regulation, and without specific code incorporated by reference or stated here, I don't know how you could administer something. But I am in agreement with you. The European system will be adopted here, or portions of it. I just don't think we can have the ambiguity that you're suggesting in a regulation.
So if a developer comes to town and says, I want to build to this standard, which doesn't necessarily cover everything that's in the green ordinance, what do we do?
I think the developer proposes that, and what we're talking about needs ordinances for approval, and proposes the alternative ordinance, and it goes through on 2 tracks. I don't know how you can regulate without having a set of regulations. That's the problem.
Right. I'm just putting it out there for debate because, this commission has done a lot of forward thinking and wishing to attract developers and all of everything that we've all gone through. And this is a concern that I have. And it's something that I felt was necessary to bring forth. And I understand Dominic's position as well.
David?
Well, do you see something in the Evanston's Green Building Ordinance that is so onerous that it would create a problem for any developer?
I think the ordinance isn't onerous enough.
Okay, well, then
I think the
fine.
ordinance.
That's my first concern.
Right, it's too easy. It's too soft. Okay. That's the concern that I've got.
I would agree with you, but I think the only way that we can really handle this is, as Dominic recommended, adding the word "as amended," and we're just going to have to be very vigilant because I agree with you. Ultimately, I think LEED's going to go away, and we're going to have codes that stipulate what has to happen. But for the time being, I think we have to go with what we have.
A lot of the design stuff that you're talking about in Europe and some of the buildings that are happening in the Chicago area have to do with things that will actually improve energy efficiency, correct? And these things for a builder are generally will do or may do because in the long run the cost of operating that building will be reduced significantly, which may entice them into doing those things without getting additional building height. Is that correct?
Right. If you look at an SOM building that's currently under construction in Shanghai, or just outside of Shanghai, I think the Red River, they actually designed a building that was net zero.
Right.
A multiple-story building that was net zero.
Larry, did you have
Well, I guess I have a couple questions. First of all, I agree with you 100%, and I've said it there's stuff in the minutes going back 2-3 years that leads is a very temporary thing at best, and because it's hard to measure, it's post-operative and all those things but it's what we got for the moment. But what, if somebody wants to come in and build to a higher standard, what in the current green building ordinance prevents that?
If the higher standard to which they go and select isn't covered by the green ordinance, and there's a potential that exists. There are things that we don't talk about facades, wind turbines inside buildings. That's where I was going with the Shanghai building.
But that doesn't mean you can't do it. It says that the minimum is the green building ordinance.
Right, but should you be rewarded for additional FAR if you go to a more onerous standard?
Commissioners, do you want to reconsider this now, or?
I think right now we use leads. I think when a more onerous standard becomes standard, then that will replace the lead statement in here, and I think that will be as an amendment to the zoning as it occurs. And I think that's something that maybe something you see changing fairly rapidly annually or something of that nature, because I agree.
It may very well be that the green building ordinance is amended before this document is adopted.
It's even possible.
Based on tonight's discussion? Yes. Can we move to inclusionary affordable?
I just want to say one thing on this, if I may. I say leave it alone. We can always change it. It's very clear, very concise, and I say leave the green, this particular provision alone.
Do we want to reconsider the word affordable in the inclusionary section? I think Andrew's policy statement was consistent with what we decided tonight.
Well, no, we were putting it in the title, so Andrew would like it out of the title. And I had asked for it to be in the title, and I think I agree with Andrew that it should be consistent with the ordinance. So thank you, Andrew, and had you brought that up while I was discussing it, I would have agreed with you then.
Other commissioners?
I agree. It should not be included in the title.
So when we consider this, we'll leave out affordable from the title. On page 23, Andrew wanted the restoration to be able to be done on city buildings.
I think that's a good point.
That's another one, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, buildings owned by the city.
C2, page 23.
Does the board want to add that language? So you'd add the language for the city after the word applicant.
The applicant owns or controls, comma, or the city owns the building that will receive the proposed improvement. I would take out the word or controls, because how do you define that? If it's the building manager, he has to have the owner's consent. So
the word controls allows us to include long-term leases, leaseholders.
So if he doesn't have the approval of the owner and we give him money to change a facade, aren't we liable?
We're not giving money. We're allowing them to do restoration. This isn't giving money. This is a restoration of a building. So if it's a long lease landowner, potentially they're restoring the building, and we will give them credit for the contribution of what that restoration equals.
On the question of city buildings, is there a commission have any opinions about adding that?
We had some discussions about similar things, and is this going to make things complicated for us?
Question.
If the developer is working, Mr. Cox, do you see this as being sort of a difficult thing to administer or not?
When we discussed this before, it was couched in terms of whether or not we said that suppose you had two private landowners, and the applicant proposed historic building preservation for a building owned by another. The question then became, how does one necessarily verify the accuracy of estimates, numbers, costs, benefit bestowed, et cetera, between those two private parties? If the city is one of the parties, some of that doubt is removed. However, it's a new proposal that I haven't had much opportunity to consider. And one point actually that's been raised is I'm not certain how many buildings the city actually has that would be subject to this. So the question becomes, and obviously including over-expansive language that if the city were to acquire or have buildings that it currently has become historic within districts or become landmarks, then it would become applicable. But the question now is whether or not it's of actual benefit. I don't know how to answer your question right now. I don't know whether or not it would be difficult to administer.
I wonder does the city want a developer that's doing a development in town working on one of their buildings?
I would raise the question with the Varsity Theatre currently under review by the city and other individuals, whether the city would actually accept private money to repair and work on the Varsity Theatre. As a resident of this city, if I was told that money was turned down by the city on the Varsity Theatre, I would consider that to be a political outrage.
Just going back to the point here.
How does that relate to a building that's owned by the city, a landmark, or a building in a historic district that's owned by the city?
The Varsity is owned by the city, correct?
No. It's privately owned.
As a practical matter, the commission and council will, if you add the language, the commission and council will look on a case-by-case basis as to whether it's workable for the city to do this. So the only question is whether you want that as an option. Even though we don't have any reason to think that the city, at present, owns any buildings that are subject to this.
Dennis?
Police buildings
Patricia? But buildings, contributing buildings in a historic district, though, I wonder.
It's part of the
school district buildings that I can't think of.
Is the idea that these private developers would give money to the city
No.
for buildings that they are not occupying or controlling in any way? I just wonder if the case is included when you say the applicant owns or controls.
I think.
Or you just envision a developer giving money to the city to go fix their facade because it's an eyesore.
Correct.
That's what, just money out of the clear blue.
If the developer wants to improve his FAR on a project and he chooses this direction, he has the opportunity to put money towards a building that the city owns and help restore it.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I find the case hard to envision that will happen, but if it happens, why not take it?
Other commissioners? Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I think it's more a case of perception. I think if it's a city-owned property and there's a developer, this developer has to go through permitting. And if, as a city, we are taking funds to rehab another city property, all sort of things could be read into it. I think it makes sense if the city is actually in a position to identify structure in the community to say this building needs attention that I can see. But
Mr. Galloway?
I don't see any reason to adopt this. If the city has such a great intent, this building does exist, let's say, number one, and the city has an intent or a desire to improve it, then the developer can just give the city funds, and then the city can do with them what they wish. I find it a little uncomfortable that a developer is going to be working on a city building at the same time he is building his own development. I just think this feels uncomfortable to me. Even if there was a building that we could come up with tonight that would fall into this probability. So I don't see any reason to add it.
Dennis?
To revise my earlier comments, there is one building I could think of that's city-owned, that's a landmark, that's 1817 Church Street at this point. There may be others, but none that I can think of right now, but I just wanted to add that.
Larry, did you have comments?
I agree. I feel uncomfortable at the perception issue. I don't want anybody to think the city is selling a permit. Even though it may not be true, your perception statement is very, very valid.
Given the Commissioner's response, I would like to withdraw that comment.
Commission still needs to reach a consensus on this. It sounds like we're reaching consensus not to make the change.
I'm with Larry.
So we will not make that change. That brings us to your suggested definition of construction cost, which would include all of the things considered and for which permits must be granted. Does the Commission think that's a reasonable definition?
I do.
Seth says he does.
I think it's a good start. I would recommend that we talk with Walter Hallen about it and see if he has anything to add in that regard, or anyone else in city staff for that matter. So if we're going to go beyond just the statement construction cost and get into a little more detail, I'd just soon have as much city staff input as possible so that we get this right.
In terms of making a recommendation tonight, can we recommend that this verbiage be included in construction cost?
Can we just recommend that city staff define construction cost?
We certainly can do that.
I think that's the way to go, is to get a definition that's all-inclusive, and then wherever it's used, it's applicable.
Because I would like the city to do that. They're far more, Walter and other individuals are far more knowledgeable about construction costs as it relates to how the permit is issued and so forth. I would rather put it in their court.
Does anyone disagree with that?
They're going to be evaluating the actual construction cost anyway. So
that brings us to the.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Andrew and staff are not far from each other, because if you look at what Craig sent earlier, the city has a way of actually estimating, doing their own independent cost estimation. And I think what Andrew is also trying to capture is infrastructural improvement. So if you have to do, for instance, if you need to get any underground or electricity, whatever you need to make the site buildable, we are in a position to capture some money from that also, right? So in that case, I think, Chairman, you're trying to get something passed. So the question is, I think we're very close in terms of Andrew's position actually gives the city more funds in the end. And the question is, where does staff stand on that if we add infrastructural improvements to it?
Mr. Kim? This is just occurring to me, so forgive me if it's not entirely clear. Some of the public benefit bonuses that one can acquire by making a donation, so in this case, which the kind we're speaking of, where you make a donation to a city-identified fund, and basically can include public improvements such as the alleyways, streetscape, and the like. If we were to include in the construction costs, so you have a developer, they're going to build their building, but then they're also going to themselves do the work in the alley. They're going to improve the alley that's adjacent to their building. So I'm backing away from the contribution language. They're actually going to do the work. We would then be including in the calculation for their bonus, the work that they're doing for the bonus itself. So in a sense, they would be getting double dipping. So actually, I think then it would make sense to just to keep the calculation based only upon the building construction cost. So because otherwise, then we're saying you're providing a public benefit, and we're going to give you the more for benefit of the benefit. Benefit of the benefit.
Do you feel the consensus is to ask staff to define this? Are you comfortable with doing that after the meeting?
I believe so. I just wanted to add that into the consideration.
Could I also ask? Sorry, could I ask the question about change orders and the reconciliation at the end of the project, where in a major high-rise change orders can be a substantial amount,
but I don't know how we could possibly implement that. We have to give the applicant a formula at the beginning of his project. So
could a fee, a percentage of the monies that are paid as an increase in the building permit fee actually go into one of the funds that we've identified?
We've never talked about that. It sounds a little, it sounds a little nasty.
Esoteric would be another word, perhaps.
So the consensus is not to go back and try and claw back additional funds.
I find it in bad sportsmanship, perhaps. And I wouldn't want to give any applicant a deterrent to making or implementing cost-increasing change orders that improve the quality of the building.
My concern is an unscrupulous developer that puts in a low number for his permit fees and produces bids that are low.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, when the actual number comes in, he got a gain in FAR, and he's willing to pay the increase in building permit fees because he took that risk. And as a consequence, the city loses. That's my concern.
I've had a discussion with Walter Halen about this, and he feels pretty confident that the city's in a position that they can accurately review an applicant's estimated construction cost to the extent that the city will not be taken advantage of.
So my question
Richard,
then...
did you have a comment?
Yeah, if a developer is going into a project, he gets to a point where it's either go or no go, and a lot of it's based on cost. And if we start to fool with the cost, then there's a question of whether development goes forward or not. We may actually be losing something, up front, just gone. Larry?
Yeah, and I think, remember, this is May. We may give them the bonus. If we don't believe their cost numbers,
they're not going to get it.
Then we don't get it.
We had a conversation, I don't think it was last month, I think it was maybe the month or two before that, about having the finalized costs based on at the time of permitting. Didn't we have a conversation about that? Mm-hmm. And where did that conversation go? Was that we weren't going to do that, or because that goes back to this, and it seems to me that if a developer is basing bonuses on costs, those costs need to be accurate, regardless of when we get them. Regardless if they're trying to play this game, the system, or not. Which is, I think, what you're saying. So I would agree with Andrew.
Go ahead. Sorry to keep interrupting here.
You're not interrupting.
The one consideration is to look at it from the sort of a very mirror perspective. Suppose I am the developer. I come in with my proposed number, my estimated building construction cost. It turns out that my building ends up being significantly more expensive to build than I originally anticipated. From that perspective, one could argue that, in effect, he actually got less FAR than that to which he might have otherwise been entitled had his numbers been better. But obviously, we can't grant additional FAR once the building is up. So then the question becomes, is if we're looking at trying to true things up based on the final construction costs, could a developer make the counter-argument rather that the city should get additional money, that the developer should then somehow have been rewarded for the additional FAR that they did not receive, but could have if their additional estimates were more accurate?
Good observation.
Very good.
Commissioners?
I personally am content to let staff, based on what we've said here, to furnish a definition of construction cost.
Is that the consensus? Good luck, staff. Brings us to whether the public plazas and parks should be accessible to the public from the sidewalk. Page 28. And we're looking at Roman numeral 6, A6. Do we want the plaza to be accessible?
Well, if present language is the plaza is visible from and connected to a public way. So if it's connected to a public way, how would it not be accessible?
The argument was that this language would include connections through buildings.
Okay. Connected directly to a public way.
I'm just trying to make sure that this public benefit is available to the public and that it's not an intimidation. We've seen public parks put on the tops of roofs of buildings and various other things, which also, for instance, if you look at Optima Towers, the orange building, it has a public park in front of it, and a part of the document that you have in front of you, the governing document, was that should be opened up for public use. It's actually connected to the public way, but is formidable, and you don't want to go in. So what I'm concerned about is that those opportunities are lost. So that
if the commissioners think this is a potential problem, we can add the phrase accessible from before the word connected to avoid any ambiguity. Or we could add the phrase that if they don't let the public in, they can tear down part of their building. But probably that's probably not workable.
actually British planning law actually includes that. If you go over the FAR, they will demolish the top part of your building.
Mr. Chairman, to me, if it's connected to a public way, that means you don't have to go through.
There could be a door. There could be a door, a glass door or whatever, and then it's still connected.
Well, that's what I don't think it is. I think if it's connected, it means there's access, free access.
Let's say free access.
And we can say accessible from.
Okay.
And connected to.
Yeah.
That removes any ambiguity. That brings us to the last item, which is the suggestion on the facade articulation, and I'll ask Mr. Galloway to address that.
I like it.
I didn't jot down the page number.
So did I.
What 27?
47.
47.
Just removing the last part of the sentence.
Very elegant.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Solution, actually.
Thank you, Andrew.
So
should we read it?
So the suggestion is facades exceeding 50 feet in width must be vertically divided into multiple bays, no more than 30 feet in width.
No. Multiple bays or segments, period.
Just or segments?
Yeah.
the designer will determine, the width of those divisions, which is exactly what the intent of my concern was about.
Is there a consensus on that change?
I thought you said not more than 30 feet apart.
No, I took the word or more than 30 feet in width.
Okay.
I removed that so that the designer had license to actually design to which he's trained to do.
As long as we don't end up with 3-foot bays.
Congratulations, gentlemen and lady. It's been a long time coming. I'm going to ask for a motion to recommend the text amendments subject to the changes we have just discussed, subject to the changes we've discussed tonight. And let me ask staff and or commissioners if there's anything that needs clarification with respect to what we agreed on tonight. I know you'll have benefit of the record to figure this out. Is there such a motion?
I move to approve the text amendments subject to the changes that have been discussed this evening.
I'll second that.
And that includes the city finding a definition for construction cost. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Does the commission wish a short break before we take up the map amendment?
Yes. Motion to have break.
We'll be in recess for till maybe 10 o'clock, unless everyone comes back sooner.
Got to go.
So, is it Miller time now?
Guinness time. Guinness time.
I need a pressure gas. Do they have Guinness in the library over here? Okay, Angela, we knew the answer, but it was wishful thinking, wasn't it?
I misspoke when I said we only had one thing left to do. We have two. The second item on zoning text amendment is to update the zoning chapters to change references made to specific or existing downtown or research park districts, remove regulatory text referencing existing provisions that would be duplicative of, made necessary by, or in conflict with the regulations proposed to be located in Chapter 11, and add the authority to approve or deny certain major developments in the DC district to the Plan Commission, and add authority to approve or deny public benefits bonuses to the City Council. And all that language appears on the agenda. And if someone would like to make a motion to approve that, then we can proceed to the map amendment. Essentially, this allows staff to deliver to City Council or Planning and Development changes in the other ordinances to conform to the text amendment. Dominic, do you want to speak to this?
At zoning committee meeting a while back, the zoning administrator to go through line by line each point where it's talked about. It describes explicitly in zoning districts D1, D2, D3, D4, and it says that throughout the zoning code. We're tearing out Chapter 11, so we would have a bunch of dead references. This would allow us to go back, and the committee had decided instead of replacing D1, D2, D3, D4 with RD1, we're just going to say downtown districts, so that in the future, if there were to be a similar adjustment, we would not need to go back and make this amendment.
Is that a motion? Motion to approve the update to the other chapters consistent with the text amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us to the zoning map amendment. I don't know which staff member will address this, but you are welcome to begin.
It's late. Craig Sklenar, General Planner. At this time, it's for deliberation on the proposed zone changes as presented in the previous map. I apologize, I forgot to add a copy to the packet, but it's has not changed from the last Plan Commission meeting. So the one that was up for discussion in January is the same for February as well.
Are there questions about the map and districts? We have a tiny copy on the draft.
Yeah, you did include it there, right there.
Is there discussion?
There was no objections.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the zoning map amendment?
Is there a second?
Second.
Having been moved and seconded, is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Passes unanimously. That brings us to the election of Plan Commission officers and representatives to the Transportation Parking Committee, Economic Development Committee, Housing and Community Development Act Committee. I talked to members about this, and everyone who is currently serving in those positions expressed a desire to continue, and several of them and some other members said there's a learning curve, and it's good to have people do it multiple years. Is there a consensus that members, let me be more specific. Let's see. Stuart Updike was interested in continuing to serve on CDBG. Seth Friedman would like to continue with the Economic Development Committee as our representative. Dave Galloway likes to continue to do Parking Committee.
Someday he'll swap with me, but
And,
I don't know when that'll be.
and the record should show that Seth Friedman at multiple meetings has expressed an interest in Parking Committee. Okay. I have polled people about which committee they'd like, subcommittee they'd like to be on, and most of the members have either said they would like to continue to serve on the zoning committee. The comp plan committee, is there anyone who was serving on that committee that wishes not to? The rules committee, I don't know who was serving on the rules committee, but it's a small committee.
Since Chuck Staley no longer is a member of the Plan Commission, we have not had a member be a part of the Rules Committee. I would highly recommend that a Rules Committee convene this year just to review and provide an update if there are any.
I think it's appropriate for the chair to serve. Is there anyone else that would like to serve on the Rules Committee? Probably will not be onerous and require numerous meetings.
I'll serve on that with you unless someone else wants to.
Should we have a new member be assigned to a committee? Should we perhaps get their indoctrination into?
Well, if I may say this, I think every member of especially the newer members of the Plan Commission should serve on the zoning committee, because zoning is really at the heart of what we do, and unless you know a lot about zoning, it takes a while to understand it and to get a handle on it.
Whatever you guys,
I'm in agreement with that suggestion.
okay. I'm happy to.
And I plan on serving on the zoning committee again, just because it's such an important function of the Plan Commission.
I'm already attending the zoning committee meeting, so I'm ready on it.
What committee would you like to?
The
zoning committee will have less to do, I would guess, but it's only a guess.
I've been going to that already, and also the CDBG one interests me. There's space in that. If there isn't, fine.
The rules require that someone from the Plan Commission serve on the CDBG, on the Housing and Community Development Act Committee, and I've been on that now for about 6 months. And I would like to continue to serve as the Plan Commission's representative on that committee, at least till the end of my term. It's the kind of committee where you have to. I think it's important that you spend a couple of years on that particular commission. But I would like to serve out at least to the end of my term, which I think is coming up in July of this year.
Okay, so it's not far. All right.
Would you help us with the Comprehensive Plan Committee? I think you bring a viewpoint that will be useful.
Okay.
We do not have a chairman for the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and when the committee meets, I think we'll take up that question. There were no excited volunteers, but we'll work on that. Any other suggestions relating to committees?
I think we need to have a committee on snacks when these meetings go that way,
Are there any committees that have a report that they would like to present? Hearing no reports, we are at the end of the agenda, and if there's a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to say it's
May I?
before we adjourn that it's good to have you back.
May I just have one moment?
Please.
It's been 9 years and a month, and I want to thank everyone for passing that, because now my work here is done.
Thank you, Larry.
And this is my last meeting as any form of a member of the Plan Commission. And I want to thank staff for having done a great job, and
Thank you.
everybody
I'd
here.
like to give you a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you.
And before we adjourn, I'd like to thank staff for their work on this fairly massive amendment. It was good work. Thank you.
And since we're thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes,
Andrew.
indeed.
Lots of good expertise.
And to Dennis Marino, who has been involved in this since the onset, almost 5 years ago, I think.
Is there a motion to adjourn? No, you like this.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to drink have one.
Why don't you second?